Hello, my fellow Umbraco lovers out there. My name is John, and in this video, you are going to learn how to create a basic search using Umbraco v9. Now, what we're going to be doing is building a search using the out-of-the-box examine index. So we're going to be looking at what's changed from V8, if anything. We're going to be looking at how to set up the MVC stuff, so the controllers, the views, how to post data back into our controllers, all of that amazing stuff. Now, this is going to be the start of a mini project. So this is episode 5 or 6 in my series of how to create a website using Umbraco v9. Now, the information we're going to learn here is going to be useful because we're going to create a fairly cool plugin. So what we're going to do is create a back-end screen, which is going to display a list of unpublished pages in ascending order. Now, in order to do this, over the next few videos, we're going to learn about notifications, how to create a backend plugin, we're going to learn about permissions, we're going to learn about how to set resources, we're going to learn how to create custom indexes within Umbraco. So if you want to learn more of these in-depth advanced features, remember to smash the subscribe button and be an absolute boss. So, assuming we've done that, let's crack on and build this. Today, we'll be building this search functionality on top of my Umbraco v9 starter kit. So if you're looking to get started with v9, if you're looking how to do this tutorial and you're struggling and you want to find a working example, what you can simply do is head over to my GitHub, which is johndjones.com, so JONDJONES, there's no H in it. Now go over to the home page, and in there you'll see that on the top left hand corner you're going to see a pinned repo called johndjones.umbraco.v9.starterkit. Simply click on that, clone it, follow it if you want to be a legend. On the screen right in front of us is the search page that we're going to be creating today. So as you can see, we've got a simple search page, as we've got here, add a querying param called search term search. So I've added this term, search term. We're going to put in this terminology, say something. This is going to return us a result down the bottom here. So, very simple search. Now, let's have a look at how this is constructed and how it works within the Umbraco backend. So, as you can see right here, underneath home, we've got our search page. So, we're going to have to create a document type for that. Now, I'm going to restrict this search to only query for content within our blog listing page. So, as you can see here, we've got these 5 pages. 3 of the pages are not published pages whatsoever, and then we've only got these 2 articles here, so by the way and something of less. So let's say we go in here and do unsaved, no results. So this is kind of key. We don't want this page here appearing in our search results, and that's kind of important, and there's a thing that we'll talk about called the different indexes. Now, when you're learning about search with Umbraco, what you need to realize is that instead of the Umbraco team going out and creating their own search provider technology themselves, what they've done is implemented an off-the-shelf third-party solution. So there are a ton of different search party providers out there. So you might have heard of like Elasticsearch. There's loads of different ones. So the one that the Umbraco team chose is called the Lucene search provider. So if you do a search for Lucene, Lucene, you'll find this page. So basically the search technology which is powering the default Umbraco search is this thing here. Now obviously this here is an Apache thing and it's not written in C#. So what Umbraco have done is created this thing called examine. And examine is basically a wrapper on top of the Lucene index. So basically you can use C# and C# code to interact with this Lucene index. So you don't need to do anything with, you don't need to worry about anything like this yourself. You don't really need to understand Lucene. However, you can if you want to learn more about it and do more complicated things. For bog standard search, you're going to be given some APIs and some helpers so you can easily search. Now, one of the important things to understand when you're using search inside of the Umbraco CMSs is that they have different types of indexes. And a really handy feature is that you can view and access a lot of information about this search inside of the CMS. So open up your Umbraco backend and go to the settings. Clicking on settings, you can see that we have this exam management. And clicking on here is basically going to give you access to 3 different indexes. So first off, we have the external index. And the external index is going to get created as soon as you install the CMS, and inside of this index is going to be all of your public facing content. So when you're creating a search, obviously you don't want to have any private or internal or non-published pages returning your search results. So when we're building this search, we will be using the external index. Now we also have an internal index, and this is going to contain all the saved, unpublished, scheduled pages. So this is going to be handy if we're creating, say, a backend plugin, which we're doing in a future video. Also, we have a member index. So this is going to contain all your users in it. So another handy feature in exam management is that if you click on any of your indexes, you're going to have access to a few useful things. So first off, if you're building a search and you're not getting any results returned in your search queries, have a look at the health status. And if this is ticking healthy and saying, yeah, everything's okay, sweet. If there's an issue there, then maybe you need to do some researching of what can break your exam indexing. Now, if you're doing a search and creating your search plugin and no results are getting returned, the first thing I recommend you do is come in here and actually do a query using this backend search. So this will get rid of, potentially any issues with your custom code. So in here, I can do something. As you can see, I've got some results. So you can always validate that the search term you're trying to do through your custom plugin and custom page works by coming in here. Also, another really useful feature is you can rebuild the index. So if you ever notice that any of your new pages they're not appearing in your search, or if there's some missing pages, come in here, click the rebuild index. Now obviously, depending on how big your website is, will determine on how long this rebuild index job takes. Generally, it's about 5-10 minutes. It's not going to break anything. So yeah, these are really useful debugging tips that you need to know about when you start creating your search. Our first task is to create a document type for our search page. So to do this, head into the Umbraco backend, go to the settings tab, go to document types and create yourself a new document type. So click on the ellipses, click on document type and knock yourself out, create one. Now, as you can see, I've got this search one, doesn't really have any properties which are related to this tutorial. So all it needs to be is blank. Now, one of the important things whenever you're creating a new document type is you want to go to your home page, you want to go to the permissions tab, and in permissions, you want to make sure that your search page or your newly created document type has been added as a child node. This means that when we come into the content tree, we can do create new page, and we've got the ability to create our search page. Now call the search page whatever you want. Now after doing this, it's very easy to forget to do this, but assuming you're using the Umbraco model builder, you want to come in here, click on model builder, and then click on this generate models button. So this is going to then update our C# classes, which we can then use within Visual Studios to start doing some interactive stuff with the CMS. The first step to create any page in code is to do all the MVC bits and bobs. So the first thing we need to do is create a controller. And this is going to allow us to do something called route hijacking. So within my starter kit, I've got a separate class library, and in here I've got all my custom code. In here I've got a folder called controller, one called Umbraco, and then you can see I've got this search. So clicking on search is going to give you this page. Now you can see that it's inheriting from render controller. So this is the standard Umbraco way of creating a document type. The name of the controller needs to map to the alias. So when we created our document type in here, you can see that we have this search alias right here. This name needs to mirror your controller, and in the back end, all the routing and all that sort of stuff will be magically hooked up for you. So let's have a look at the code within here. Zoom in a bit so you can see. So when you're creating any controller within Umbraco v9, you're going to have to deal with all these different types of import parameters. So most of this stuff is Umbraco specific and not anything custom. Now the one thing that I am doing which is custom to this controller is I'm injecting this iSearch service. So this is something that I've created myself. And as you can see down here, we've got this search service and we're going query Umbraco. So this is all we really need to do to then start triggering off this custom code and querying the examine index. So what we've got here is a single index. So we've called it search. Now, as you can see, we've got two parameters being passed in. So I've got the search term and I've also got one called page. So I don't need to do any custom routing rules, don't need to do anything clever. All I need to do is within my search page, create this route here and then pass in any parameters. So super dead simple. Now the first thing we're doing in here is newing up a document type. So this search object here relates to the model which is being generated by Umbraco. So as you can see here, I've got this class library called Umbraco models. If I scroll down here, you can see that I've got this search generated, which is out of view. So you can see that we have this search generated.css file. So this is a model which has been generated by Umbraco automatically. And opening up, you can see it's just got a load of auto-generated code. But using this model-based approach, we can access our search page really easily and all the properties contained within it. So this is pretty much all I've done to create this search page. We're creating up a new instance of the model builder. We're calling this custom search service that we're going to look at shortly. We're passing in a param, so we don't need to do any of the routing rules. And then we're just simply passing back a view model. Now, if you look in my Umbraco V8 series, you can see that I use something called a composed view model to pass data back. So in my models, I pass the model generated by Umbraco back into my view, and I also pass this custom view model. So I'm not going to cover this composed view page model here. There's loads of different ways of passing data from a controller to a view. Yeah, if you want to see how to do this and the reason why I do this, check out my Umbraco V8 video. So we've got our controller set up. Let's just quickly have a look at the view. So expanding this back up in our web solution, you can see that within my views folder right here, we've got this folder called search. So this maps to the document type alias. In search, we've got this index HTML. And in here, there's nothing really too special. I'm basically passing in, I'm passing in the composed view model. So we've got our search, we've got our view model, and then we're just simply getting a load of display results. We're using a simple for each to go through those results, and then for each item in our collection, we're simply rendering out a URL and a name. So obviously, when it comes to your implementation, the HTML and everything you're doing is going to be custom to your design. However, all you really need to do is get that data in your controller, pass it down with the view model into your view, and then render everything out. Nice and simple. So going back to our controller, you'll see that we're implementing this iSearch service. So this is being passed in, and with Umbraco V9 and V8, dependency injection is provided to you out of the box. So we're going to be using dependency injection to add this service and access it. So this means we can use our solid principles, we can unit test stuff, we can use the open closed principle, and all those really nice software engineering design paradigms that I'm a big fan of. So let's have a look at how we do this. So in order to configure Umbraco to work with our dependency injection, so this automatically maps up, we're going to have to create a composer. So in here you can see that I've got this folder called composers, and in here I've got a file which is called register dependencies. So as of Umbraco V9, you had the V8, sorry, you had these things called composers and components. And components and composers are the way that we can bootstrap Umbraco when it starts up. So if you want to register your custom stuff with the dependency injection framework, if you want to register some custom notifications or some components, you can do it all inside of here. So what you'll need to do is create something, a class. It needs to implement the iComposer interface. From here, you're going to have to implement this compose and then with the Umbraco builder. And all you're going to need to do to register this custom service in your application is do builder.services.transients, and then you put in your interface to your concrete implementation. So the transient, what this means is that on each request or every single time that Umbraco sees a request for this iSearch settings, it's going to create a new object of this type. Now there's different ways of doing dependency injection. I've done a video on this in my Umbraco V8 series. So if you're interested more about that sort of stuff, go back to that old video. There'll probably be a link below. So let's have a look at this search service. So in my folder, I've got something called services. Let's move it across so you can see it. And in here, I've got this search service. So search service is implementing our iSearch service interface. and I've created this myself in here. You can see that it's got two implementations. We're going to ignore the second one because we're covering that in a later video. So in here we've got our query Umbraco, and let's just go to the definition or implementation even. So this is getting passed in a few things. So in order to interact with examine and the examine index, you'll be using this API in Umbraco called iExamine Manager. So we want to first inject this in. Umbraco has all this set up, so you'll automatically get all the dependency injection. Now in here, we're going to need to query the front end cache for some extra information. So when we do our search query, we're going to need to get some extra information about each page. So we're going to be doing this using the Umbraco Context Accessor API. And then we're also going to be using the content service. Actually, no, we're not in this video. Ignore that one. So the important things to note in here are we're using the Umbraco Context Accessor and we're using the Exam Manager. Now we're also doing good practices by passing in the iLogger. It's very simple how to use that. So this is our query Umbraco method that you see in front of us. So what we're doing is taking in that search term, and potentially you want to put in a page index and page size and all that sort of stuff. And I won't really cover how to do pagination within this tutorial. There's loads of different ways of doing it. There's Umbraco .NET Core NuGet package which you can install and map everything if you really want to. So as you can see, we're starting off returning a list of iPublished content. So this is going to be a list of Umbraco pages. Now the first thing that we need to do when we're working with Umbraco is get access to the index. So we do this using the Examine Manager, and we use this try get index. So using this Umbraco CMS core constants, you get access to the external index name, and you also get access to the internal name. So this is just a nice clean way of accessing that index. So this is using a try get. So what we need to do is pass in an out and an index. And it's also good practice to make sure that the index is of type Umbraco index. Let's be honest, this bit of code is probably not needed. However, for good practice, it's always good to make sure that the type you're working in is of the type you expect. So obviously, if you can't access the index, anything like that, it's just good to throw an invalid operation exception. So this is just going to tell you that the index is wrong. So if this thing ever triggers, you probably want to go into the CMS, go to that exam management tab, and then from there you want to start rebuilding the indexes, that sort of jobbing. Now, in order to query the index, you're going to be doing this searcher. So the first thing you need to do is an index.searcher, and this is going to create this searcher. From this searcher, we can then build up a search query that we can use to query the index. So the first thing to do is do a searcher.createQuery. You can probably guess what that means. And then we're going to pass in indextypes.content. So we're going to say we just want to index the content pages. We don't care about media, members, all that sort of stuff. We just want some pages. Now, there's loads of different ways that you can extend and query the Umbraco index. So for this simple example, I'm doing a field. So what we're saying here is we want to do a search on field node name. So this is going to be the page title basically, or the name within the CMS. And we're going to pass in that search term. So the search term that we pass in from the query string is getting passed into here. We're then saying we want to do a match on the node name and the search term. Job's good. Now, obviously, when you're doing your own search, you might want to do some more complicated things. So, for example, let's say that we want to restrict our search, so our search only works based on blogs. So, we want to ignore everything else. So what we can do, as you can see here, you can do this .and we also have options to do a .or if we want to. So, you can do all your conditional logic. So we also want to do and field. And we can also in here do, you can query the fields by the Lucene index terms. So this here, we've got __ node type alias. So what we could do in this example, and this is the easiest way to get any of the aliases for a document type, is access the model builder model, so blog. And then from here, you can do model type alias. And this is going to give you access to that blog model type alias. Now there's loads of other things that you can do when you're building up your queries. So you can do this grouped or. So you could say say your search term might have spaces in it. So you might want to do a search or a lookup per term rather than the complete search term. So you could do a grouped or based on your node name and then splitting up your search term by a space. It's also possible to restrict where your search is performed. So using parent ID, you can lock in where in the content tree that you're going to do a search. So you can see here we've got parent ID 1105, and we're saying that we're only going to search this time on our main content field. It is also possible to start doing some querying and some filtering when you're doing your searches. So as you can see, we've got like the order by, and we've got our order by descending. And then to do this, we create an array of sortable fields. From here, you can then pass in all the fields that you want to order stuff by. Now, this isn't the only way that you can do this type of filtering. You can also filter the results after you get them back. So it's kind of up to you where you want to do it. Now, after you've built this query up using this Fluent API, the last thing you need to call is this .execute method. And .execute is basically going to mean fire off, let's go to the index and query the data and return everything. So as you can see here, the create query is going to return this type of iSearch results. So when you do a search, you're not actually going to get access to the Umbraco pages directly. You're going to get a list of search results which have been created within the Lucene index. So this is basically Lucene data rather than Umbraco data. So when you're getting this data, one thing you can do is get a score. So how relevant is the data and the item compared to your search term? So as you can see in here, I've done a order by descending score. So when we're in our search page, our search results are going to be filtered basically on how relevant they are to the search term. So most relevant at the top, you get the gist. Now, the other thing we want to probably do is get this Umbraco object. So because these results are the iSearch results, you're not going to have access to your page data. You're not going to have access, say, to any content within. So what we're going to do in here is call this method which I've created. It's down here. What we're going to do then is take in the ID. So we get the ID of every single object, or Umbraco ID of every single object returned from our search. So you get a few access, you get like values, we get the score. So basically you don't have the information you want. So we're going to do an int.parse. From here, we're then going to use that Umbraco accessor. And then we're going to query the Umbraco context, use a get by ID to query the Umbraco front-end cache, and then this is going to give us access to our iPublish content. This is then going to loop around and iterate, so we're then going to do our select, and this is going to build up this selection of iPublish content. Once we've got all of those items populated, we return them back, and then going back to our search service, as you can see, we now have access to all of our results, which we can pass down into our view model, and you get the gist. So this is kind of how you can create your own search. As you can see, you actually have a lot of power. So let's quickly go over it. So what you want to do is use the examine manager to get a reference to that external index name. After doing this, you want to create a searcher, and in your searcher, you can then start building a search query. And using things like and, field, groups are, parent ID, order by, ascending. There's also some other ones like node type alias that you can use. You can start to build up this query. Once you've built up a query that you're happy with, you call the execute method on it. And then once you've done the execute method, it is very simple. All you need to do is convert your search result object to an Umbraco published content type, pass that back down to your controller, and then render it out to a view. So, simple, right? Before I bid you adieu and wrap up this video, there's probably some value in me showing you how to do pagination in Examine Manager. Now, as I was saying a little while ago, there's different ways of doing pagination, and it all kind of depends on your requirements, how busy your website is. Now, if you're in a really busy, high traffic website, having to constantly query the server for your pagination results might actually degrade your performance. So in these instances, The more requests which go back to the server, the less overall people you can handle. So this might actually slow down your whole website. So in this instance, you might just want to query examine, get all the results, return the results back into your controller, cache them in the controller level, or maybe even the client side, and then you can speed things up. Now, it's also perfectly valid to start doing your pagination and querying the pagination results inside of examine. So if that makes you happy, I'll show you how to do that quickly. So the first thing we can do when we're wanting to do pagination is we want to use the query options parameter. So this is a thing which comes with Umbraco. It's an examine.search query options, and query options takes two constructor arguments. So it takes a skip and it takes a take. So skip and take is pretty common if you're doing any sort of pagination, regardless of the programming language. These are pretty much the terms used. So skip, fairly easy, is that say you've got results, 100 results returned. In your website, when you're doing pagination, you're doing 10 items per page. If you want to get the results on page, say 3, you need to do 3 times 10 results, page 3, and then you're going to skip 30 items. So for our example, let's just do 30. Then to get the results just for page 30, you don't want to return everything after, page 4. So what we can say is, we want to skip 30 and we want to take 10. So this is going to give us all of our results for page 3. So what we can do now with our query options is we can pass it into the execute. So execute has a nullable or optional argument of query options. So as you can see here, it's very easy just to pass in our execute, this query options, and this is then going to filter our results to only page 3's worth of results. Now, it is possible to do this all in link. So as you can see, we've got our skip, and then we can put our 30 like this, and then we can put our take with the page size like that. Do what makes you happy. However, you do have the option of passing this in with Examine Manager. And one actual final thing that I thought I'd talk about is that in your Umbraco page, if you look within your Umbraco folder, you should see that you have the options of data, you have temp, and then within here, you've also got examine indexes. Hopefully you can see that. So in here, if you look, you can see we've got external index, internal index. And if you just do open a folder in File Explorer, hopefully you can see, you'll get access to all of your index in disk in this folder location. So potentially you might want to delete this. You can use a tool called Luke for Lucene to query all these files. But yeah, handy little tip before we leave. So that concludes everything you pretty much need to know in order to create a search using Umbraco and Examine. So for the Umbraco old hands out there, as you can see, not much has really changed between V8 and V9. Still pretty easy to create a basic search. So as I was saying, this is the first of a mini project. So what we're doing in future videos is looking how to extend the search with a custom index. We're going to be querying the internal index, creating backend plugins. So if you want to learn more about complex Umbraco topics, remember to smash the subscribe button right now. Now, if you like this type of content, please let me know by hitting the like button. Basically, when you hit like, it means I can do more content of this type. So if you want to see me doing more Umbraco videos, please hit like, because I very much appreciate it. Also, this is a series and season about Umbraco. So if there's something, a topic in particular you'd like me to talk about, please leave a comment because they do get added to my to-do list. So one day I'll do a video if you really are nice enough to me. Aside from that, the only thing I can say is my Umbraco V9 book is going to come for pre-release soon, hopefully come in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So look out for a link on Leanpub. So if you want to support me, that would be a great way. Another way to support me is signing up to my newsletter. Every Sunday, far off, industry news, tips on how to become a better developer. It's free. The link is below. So clicking on that, I would appreciate it greatly. Anyway, I hope you found some value. Hope you learned a lot about search. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are in the world, and happy coding.